If you ever looked at your podcast and thought to yourself, maybe this just isn't for me. I just need to quit. This video might make you feel uncomfortable, but in a good way. Because most of the time, it's not because your podcast sucks. It's simply because it's misaligned. And that distinction matters more than you think. If this is your first time checking out the YouTube channel, welcome. My name is Ozeal, and I've been in the podcasting space for over 10 years now, helping indie podcasters, B2B podcasters scale their influence with podcasting. And as I mentioned, I've been in the game since 2012 to be exact. And I can tell you firsthand that there were long stretches where I assumed the problem was me, that it was my podcast. The content wasn't landing, the growth felt stale, stagnant, and the effort felt mad heavy. I felt like I was putting all this time and energy into my work, but nothing was growing. And if you're a podcaster watching this or listening, you're on two paths. Either your podcast is intentional and it's aligned with your business objectives and what you do as a content creator, and you're growing, or on the other path is that you're just not growing. You're doing the work, you're putting it out there, you're sharing it with your friends on social media, but it feels stagnant, it's not growing, and you're like, what gives? Like, what's happening here? Like, I thought this thing was supposed to be a little easier than this, but nobody's catching on. And I thought this amazing idea that I had to have this podcast isn't popping off. What's happening? So naturally, a lot of podcasters feel this way, and I remember going through this feeling where I questioned my ability, I questioned my voice. I questioned whether the podcast is worth continuing. I mean, I've dealt with this recently, right? I've talked about this on the podcast before on this YouTube channel, is where is this podcast going? And I always say that you always want to make sure that you do at least an audit check, at least quarterly, just to make sure that things are aligned with what you want to accomplish. A lot could happen throughout the year, and it's going to be important for you to make sure that you are being balanced and being aligned with what your main objective is. And when I look back at those moments of self-doubt and frustration, I realized that the issue wasn't the quality, it was simply alignment. That's it. And I believe that a lot of podcasters and a lot of podcast coaches out there don't really talk about that. They're really good at giving you the marketing tactics and all the things that you should be doing to grow your podcast, but they're missing a very key factor when it comes to having a successful podcast. Because when a podcast is misaligned, everything feels harder. From the work of producing it, the content ideas become harder, the marketing becomes a lot more challenging. Everything is just heavier. And you can probably feel this whenever, you're consistent, but you're still feeling like unclear about the message and whether or not it's landing. You're publishing the content, but yet you're frustrated. You're improving the technicality, but you're not moving forward strategically. Misalignment usually shows up in all three places. And here are three things that I've noticed. Number one, like the podcast, it doesn't support your business or life goals. That's how you know you're feeling misaligned. Number two, the audience isn't quite clear. Like you have an idea, but you really don't know who you're talking to. And then number three, the role of the podcast, you feel like the message behind it isn't quite dialed in. It's a bit general. Even you feel it yourself as the host. So you keep on pushing and you keep on pushing, you keep on publishing content, but yet you're still not seeing any leverage. You're not seeing any growth. And most podcasters pod fade. They say about 7 to 10 episodes in, and they don't quit simply because they're bad. Like some of the ideas that when I coach some indie podcasters, their ideas isn't bad. Like some of the ideas are really, really good, but they're still not growing. They simply quit because, they're tired, right? They fade away. They're tired of watching the downloads, every day, every week when they publish a new episode. They start comparing themselves to their peers. So that becomes more like mentally fatigue, where they're just tired of looking at what other people are doing. They're getting tired out. And then again, they're doing all the work. They're doing the work, but without clarity. And that's mentally tiring. So what happens? They get tired. And, when things start feeling heavy, I've been there, my friend. It just, your brain, your mental toughness, it just becomes it becomes a breakdown of doing all the things, trying all the things, and none of it is working. And then you start really echoing that narrative of like, maybe I'm just not good enough. Like maybe this is just not for me. You may be on this path right now. And that's why I decided that, you know what, let me go ahead and before we close out the year, let me share this with you because I feel like we could all use a good podcast brand reset. And also some words of encouragement. Not to say, if you decide to quit for the right reasons, but because your podcast isn't landing, I feel like some of these steps are going to help you hit the reset, and then you can give it another try, double down on it, and see. And I can guarantee that you'll see some growth. It's not because your show sucks. It's because alignment. Once again, all right, you're building something without a clear foundation. So let me share with you, for me, the moment it clicked for me, things didn't change when I got better equipment. I've upgraded my equipment before. I've gotten better artwork. That didn't change. I remember even getting some more higher profile guests. None of it really moved the needle. All right. Some people think that, I need to get better guests so I can have more, high profile guests so I can have more downloads. Rarely the case. All right. After publishing over 500 podcast episodes and helping others do the same thing and working with some top 1% world-class podcasters, that's rarely the case. When alignment showed up, when it was carved out and it was dialed in, the work became lighter. Things started growing. The attention started being attracted. The right attention was being attracted to the brand and to the things that I was doing. So didn't get easier, but it got lighter. From the marketing, the content, the packaging, it just became a lot lighter. And I know you're probably seeking, I know you're looking for that. And I'm here to let you know that I'm telling you that once you get this aligned, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot lighter when it comes to everything that you're doing as a podcaster. So before you try to fix your podcast, before you go through a full-blown rebrand and start doing your artwork and started upgrading all these things, before you start posting, more clips on social media, before you start chasing the next strategy or trying to get into the next group coaching to get all this stuff. Listen, I'm a big believer in all that. I just think there's stages, there's phases to this. I want to challenge you because I want you to succeed, to ask yourself, does this podcast support my brand? Does this support my business? And does it support the kind of life I want to build? Is this part of your lifestyle brand? Because a podcast that's aligned compounds. Let me repeat that. A podcast that is aligned compounds. A podcast that's not going to drain you, but is going to transform your business. And that's the mission I'm on. All right. So if you're feeling like your podcast is feeling heavy right now, my friends, if you're feeling like it's, just not growing and you may need to just quit because podcasting is not for you, I'm going to challenge you to rethink that narrative, that your podcast isn't broken. It simply means that it needs to be clarified. It needs alignment. And I've said this before, clarity usually comes before momentum, not after it. So no, your podcast doesn't suck. I'm going to go ahead and reiterate that again. It's just asking you to build it with intention. I got more coming soon. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow Creator Factor on your favorite podcast app. Happy New Year, and let's make 2026 the best year for your podcast brand. Peace and one love.